He wasn't supposed to survive, and somehow, that was the quietest part of his story. The rain falls in thin, steady lines across the empty park, tapping against cold metal benches and pooling along the cracked concrete paths where no one lingers this early in the morning. The sky a dull sheet of gray that presses low like a weight no one can name. And at the far end near a rusted lamppost that flickers even in daylight, a man sits alone in a worn wheelchair, unmoving, as if time itself has decided to pass him by without notice. His name is Daniel Hayes, 38 years old. United States Marine Corps, retired not by choice but by consequence. His frame still broad beneath a weathered jacket that hangs a little too loose. His hair cut short out of habit rather than necessity, streaks of gray beginning to claim the edges. His skin pale under the muted light, and his eyes, a tired blue, fixed somewhere beyond the reach of anything living. Because some mornings it is easier to look at nothing than to remember everything. The faint creak of his wheelchair echoes each time he shifts even slightly. A small sound swallowed quickly by the open air, and people pass by at a distance, joggers with headphones, a woman walking her golden retriever, a man sipping coffee from a paper cup, all of them moving through their own lives with quiet urgency, none of them slowing, none of them seeing him the way he used to be seen, as someone who mattered, as someone who stood tall instead of sitting still. And the scent of wet pavement mixes with the faint trace of grass and iron from the nearby fence, a smell that lingers like memory, stubborn and uninvited. Daniel exhales slowly, watching his breath vanish into the damp morning, as if even that refuses to stay. His hands rest on his lap, fingers rough, scarred, still carrying the strength of a life that once demanded more from them. But now they hold nothing, not purpose, not direction, not even the illusion of either. And for a long moment the world continues without him, steady and indifferent, until something shifts at the edge of his vision, subtle, almost easy to miss. A shape moving against the muted tones of the park, low, deliberate, not hurried like the others, not wandering without aim, but choosing a path with quiet certainty. And Daniel doesn't look at it right away, because he has learned that most things that come close eventually leave. But the presence lingers, closer now, the faint sound of paws against damp ground barely audible beneath the rhythm of rain. And then it stops, not in front of him, not begging, not barking, but beside him, close enough that he can feel the warmth without turning his head. A German shepherd, its coat darkened by rain, its posture calm, steady, as if it has always known this exact place to sit. And for a moment, nothing happens, no sudden movement, no demand, just the quiet, shared space between two beings the world has already learned to overlook. And Daniel finally turns his head, slowly, almost reluctantly, his gaze meeting amber eyes that do not look away, do not ask, do not judge, only remain. And something in that stillness feels unfamiliar, like a memory he cannot quite reach, like a door long closed that has just begun to open without a sound. Daniel does not speak at first, because there is nothing left in him that feels worth saying, and the dog does not seem to expect anything anyway. It simply remains there beside him, steady and grounded, as if it has made a decision long before arriving. The rain continuing to fall in soft, patient rhythms that blur the edges of the world into something quieter, something slower, and for a while they exist like that, two figures carved into the same moment, until Daniel finally exhales and shifts slightly in his chair, the faint mechanical creak breaking the silence, his hand lifting just enough to gesture away without looking directly at the animal, not out of cruelty but out of habit, a reflex learned from too many things that did not stay. Go on now, he mutters under his breath, his voice rough from disuse. There is nothing here for you. But the dog does not move, not even an inch. Its ears flick once at the sound of his voice, its gaze steady, almost patient, and Daniel lets out a quiet, humorless breath, shaking his head slightly as if the situation itself does not make sense. People leave. That is how it works. Even the good ones, especially the good ones. And yet this animal, soaked through, sitting in the rain with no sign of urgency or need, chooses to stay where there is clearly nothing to gain. And something about that unsettles him more than if it had barked or begged or wandered off like everything else. He shifts again, this time turning his head just enough to study it more closely. The coat thick and dark, streaked with rain, the posture disciplined in a way that does not belong to a stray, the kind of stillness that feels learned, not accidental, and his eyes narrow. Slightly, not in suspicion, but in recognition of something he cannot yet name. The dog's chest rises and falls in slow, controlled breaths, its body angled just enough toward him to acknowledge his presence without crowding it. And for a brief moment Daniel feels something stir beneath the weight he has carried for so long. Something unfamiliar, fragile, like the echo of a memory that refuses to fully surface. "You picked the wrong guy," he says quietly, this time looking directly at the animal. His voice softer now, almost tired in a different way. "I am not worth the trouble." The words hang there, not as a statement of fact, but as something closer to confession, and the dog tilts its head slightly, just enough to catch the change in tone. Then, slowly, without hesitation, it shifts closer, closing the small space that had existed between them, and Daniel stiffens instinctively, his hand gripping the armrest of his chair as if preparing for something sudden. But there is nothing sudden about what happens next. The dog simply lowers itself to the ground beside him, its body pressing lightly against the side of the wheelchair, solid, warm, present, and then, after a pause that feels longer than it is, it rests its head gently against his leg, not demanding, not asking, just there, and the contact is so simple, so unguarded, that it catches him off balance in a way he is not prepared for, because it has been a long time since anything living has touched him without expectation, without obligation, without leaving shortly after, and his breath catches slightly, his fingers loosening against the cold metal as he looks down at the weight resting against him, the steady warmth seeping through the fabric of his jeans, grounding him in a way nothing has for months, maybe longer, and for a moment he does nothing, as if afraid that even the smallest movement might break whatever this is. But the dog does not pull away, does not flinch, it simply remains, trusting in a way that feels undeserved, and Daniel swallows hard, his jaw tightening as something shifts behind his eyes, something he has kept buried under routine and silence. His hand lifts slowly, hesitantly, hovering above the dog's head as if asking permission without words, and when his fingers finally make contact, brushing against damp fur, the reaction is immediate but quiet. The dog leans into the touch, just slightly, just enough to meet him halfway, and that is when it happens, not loud, not dramatic, but undeniable, a crack in the armor he has built around himself, a single breath that is not steady, a single moment where the weight of being alone begins, just barely, to loosen its hold. The rain begins to thin, not stopping completely but softening into a mist that hangs in the air like a breath that refuses to leave. And Daniel keeps his hand where it is, resting against the dog's head, his fingers moving slightly now, slow, uncertain strokes through damp fur that feels warmer than it should in a morning like this. And the dog does not shift away, does not startle, it simply accepts the touch as if it has been waiting for it, as if this moment was always meant to happen. And Daniel notices something then, something small but impossible to ignore. The way the dog responds not just with stillness but with awareness, a subtle adjustment of posture, a slight lift of the head, the kind of reaction that feels less like instinct and more like understanding, and his brow tightens as he studies it more closely, because there is a difference between a stray and something trained, something that has known commands, structure, purpose, and this animal carries that difference. In the way it holds itself, in the way it watches without wandering, in the way it stays without being told. "You are not just passing through, are you?" he murmurs quietly, his voice almost lost beneath the soft hiss of the lingering rain, and the dog's ears flick again, not randomly but in response. And that is when something deeper stirs, something that does not belong to the present moment but pushes its way forward anyway, a memory not yet formed into words, just a feeling, a recognition buried beneath layers of time and silence. And Daniel's hand pauses, hovering for a second before settling again, this time firmer, more deliberate, as if testing something unseen. He shifts slightly in his chair, the wheels creaking faintly beneath him, and the dog adjusts instantly, repositioning without hesitation to remain at his side, precise, controlled, almost practiced, and Daniel exhales slowly, his eyes narrowing as the pieces begin to move in a direction he does not fully understand yet. He glances down at the dog's paws, noting the wear, the strength in the stance even at rest, then up again to its eyes, amber, steady, watching him not like a stranger, but like something else entirely, something familiar. And for a moment the world around them seems to fade, the distant footsteps, the muted traffic, even the soft rain dissolving into the background as his focus sharpens on the presence beside him. And then it happens, small, almost nothing, but enough. His hand shifts slightly, brushing along the side of the dog's neck, and his fingers catch on something hidden beneath the fur. Not a collar, not exactly, but a thin, worn strap, nearly invisible unless you know where to look, and his breath catches just a fraction as his fingers trace it, slow, careful, as if afraid the discovery itself might disappear if he moves too quickly. "Hey," he whispers, the word softer now, carrying something new beneath it, something closer to disbelief than curiosity, and the dog does not pull away. It remains steady, allowing the contact, allowing the moment to unfold without resistance. And Daniel leans forward slightly, his posture no longer distant but drawn in, pulled by something he cannot ignore, his hand slipping gently beneath the fur to find the edge of the strap, worn leather, faded, the kind that has seen time and weather and use. And his throat tightens as a memory flickers just out of reach, something about gear, about training, about a different life where things like this meant something clear, meant purpose, and he swallows hard, his voice barely audible now. "Where did you come from?" And the question is not really a question, not anymore. It is the beginning of something else, something forming just beneath the surface, and the dog responds not with sound, but with action, a subtle shift, a straightening of its posture, its head lifting slightly as if waiting, as if anticipating something that has not yet been said, and Daniel feels it then, unmistakable, a pull from somewhere deep inside him, a word, a command, something he has not spoken in years but suddenly remembers without trying. His lips part slightly, hesitation flickering across his face, because saying it would mean acknowledging what he is beginning to suspect, and for a moment he almost stops himself, almost lets it pass. But the silence between them feels too full, too charged to ignore, and so, quietly, almost against his own will, he speaks, a single word, low and steady, the way it was always meant to be said, "Stay." And the reaction is immediate, not dramatic, not exaggerated, but precise. The dog stills completely, its body aligning with the command as if it has been waiting for it all along, as if the word itself has reached across time and distance and found its mark. And Daniel's breath falters, his chest tightening as the realization edges closer, not fully there yet, but undeniable now. This is not just a dog that chose him. This is something else entirely, something that remembers. The word lingers in the air long after it is spoken, quiet but heavy, as if it carries more than sound, as if it carries memory, and the dog does not break position. Not even slightly, its body locked in place with a precision that feels practiced, familiar in a way that tightens something deep inside Daniel's chest. And for a moment he cannot move, cannot breathe the same way he did just seconds ago. Because that response was not coincidence, it was not chance, it was recognition, and his hand, still resting against the dog's neck, begins to tremble just enough for him to notice. His fingers pressing more firmly into the damp fur, as if grounding himself in something real, something undeniable, and his mind begins to reach backward, not in a clear line but in fragments, flashes of a different time, a different version of himself, commands spoken without hesitation, trust given without question, a bond built in places far from quiet parks and passing strangers. And he shakes his head, slightly as if trying to steady the rush of it, his voice coming out lower now. "Rougher, you should not know that." The words barely more than a breath, and yet the dog's ears flick again, not startled, not confused, but attentive, waiting, always waiting, and Daniel shifts forward in his chair, the wheels scraping softly against the wet concrete, his posture no longer distant but drawn in, pulled closer by something he cannot ignore anymore, his hand sliding along the side of the dog's neck again until he finds the strap once more, this time more deliberate, his fingers tracing its edge, feeling the worn leather, the subtle indentation where something once hung, something that is not there now but left its mark behind, and his throat tightens as the pieces begin to align, slow but certain, He glances around the park as if expecting someone to step forward, to claim the animal, to explain it away, but no one does. The world continues at its same quiet pace, indifferent, unaware that something impossible is unfolding in plain sight. And he looks back down, his gaze locking onto the dog again, searching, questioning. And for the first time there is something else in his expression, something fragile but unmistakable, hope mixed with fear, because if he is right, if even part of what he is beginning to believe is true, then this is not just chance. This is something far deeper, something that reaches into parts of his life he thought were closed forever, and he swallows hard. His voice barely steady now. Heel. The command comes softer, almost hesitant. But it is clear, and the response is immediate. The dog rises smoothly, moving with controlled ease, stepping into position beside him with exact alignment, shoulder near the wheel of the chair, posture straight, attentive, as if no time has passed at all, as if this is not a reunion but a continuation. And Daniel inhales sharply, the sound catching in his chest as his eyes widen just slightly, because there is no denying it now. No way to dismiss what he is seeing. This is not instinct. This is training. This is memory. This is something that belonged to a life he lost. And for a moment he cannot speak, cannot form the words that are pressing against the back of his mind, because saying them would make it real, would force him to face the possibility that something he thought gone has somehow found its way back to him. And the dog stands there, steady, unwavering, its amber eyes fixed forward but aware of him in every small shift, every breath. And Daniel reaches out again, this time not hesitant, his hand moving to rest firmly against the side of its neck, his fingers curling slightly into the fur as if holding onto something that might disappear if he lets go. And his voice, when it comes, is quieter than before. But it carries weight now, a name forming slowly, uncertain but rising from somewhere deep, somewhere he has not allowed himself to go in a long time. And he stops just short of saying it, his lips parting before closing again, because the truth is too close now, too real, and he is not sure he is ready to face it. Not yet, not fully, but the dog shifts slightly, just enough to press closer to him again, a silent reassurance, a presence that does not question his hesitation, does not rush him, only stays. And in that stillness, Daniel feels it clearly for the first time, not confusion, not coincidence, but connection, something that was never completely lost, only waiting to be found again. Daniel's hand does not leave the dog's neck, not now, not after what he has just seen, because pulling away would feel like denying something that has already taken root, something that has already begun to change the weight in his chest. And he exhales slowly, his breath uneven as his gaze drifts downward again, tracing every detail with a focus that borders on disbelief, the shape of the ears, the disciplined posture even in stillness, the quiet awareness in those amber eyes that never fully leave him. And he shakes his head once, almost to himself, because this is not possible, not after all this time, not after everything that was lost. And yet the evidence sits right beside him, breathing, waiting, staying, and his voice comes again, softer now, stripped of the edge it carried before. Who trained you? The question barely more than a whisper, but it is not really meant for the dog. It is meant for the past, for the part of his life that feels closer now than it has in years. And the dog shifts slightly, not breaking position but leaning just enough into him again, reinforcing what words cannot. And Daniel closes his eyes for a brief moment, the rain now nothing more than a faint mist against his face, cool and grounding, as something inside him begins to surface, something he has kept buried beneath routine and distance, a memory that does not arrive all at once but in pieces, the sound of boots on gravel, the steady rhythm of commands spoken with certainty, the presence of a partner that never questioned, never hesitated. And his fingers tighten slightly against the fur as the name finally presses forward, not fully spoken yet, but there, undeniable. And when he opens his eyes again, they are different, not empty, not distant, but searching, and he studies the dog more closely, this time not as a stranger, but as someone trying to recognize what has always been familiar. And his hand moves carefully along the worn strap again until his fingers find a small imperfection, a slight ridge in the leather where something had once been attached, something that is no longer there. And his breath catches as his thumb traces it, because he remembers that detail, not clearly, not completely, but enough. Enough to make his chest tighten in a way that feels both painful and necessary. And he leans forward slightly, his posture no longer guarded but drawn in, his voice quieter now, almost afraid of the answer he is about to uncover. Easy, he murmurs, the word instinctive. Not a command this time, but a reassurance, and the dog responds in kind, its body relaxing just enough. Beneath his touch, a subtle shift that feels like trust, like recognition, and Daniel swallows hard, his throat tight as the realization edges closer, closer than he has allowed anything to get in a long time. And he finally lets the name form, slow, uncertain, but real. Ranger. The word leaves him like something fragile, like something that could break if spoken too loudly, and for a heartbeat nothing changes, the world remains as it was, quiet, gray, indifferent, and then the dog reacts, not dramatically, not with noise or movement that demands attention, but with something far more powerful. Its ears lift slightly, its posture sharpens, and it turns its head just enough to look directly at him, fully, completely, as if hearing that name has reached something deep within it, something that has been waiting, and Daniel's breath falters, his chest tightening as the last barrier begins to give way, because that look, that recognition, it is not imagined, it is not coincidence, it is real, and he feels it settle into place, heavy and undeniable. This is not just any dog. This is not a stranger that chose to sit beside him in the rain. This is something he once knew, something he once trusted, something he once lost, and his hand moves again, this time with purpose, resting firmly against the dog's head as if anchoring himself to the truth of it, and his voice, when it comes again, is no longer uncertain. It carries something deeper now, something that has been missing for a long time. I thought you were gone. The words barely audible, but they carry the weight of everything he has not said, everything he has not allowed himself to feel. And the dog does not move away, does not break contact. It simply remains there, steady and present, as if answering in the only way it can, by staying, and for the first time in a long while. Daniel does not feel invisible. He does not feel forgotten, because something has found him again, something that remembers who he was, even when he tried to forget. The name does not fade after he says it. It stays there between them like something reclaimed, something pulled back from a place he had sealed off, and Daniel feels it settle deeper in his chest, heavy but no longer hollow, his hand still resting firmly against Ranger's head, as if confirming that this is real, that this is not another memory playing tricks on him. And Ranger does not look away, his amber eyes locked onto Daniel now with a clarity that feels almost human, almost knowing, and for a moment neither of them moves, the world around them continuing in quiet indifference, while something far more important unfolds in silence. And Daniel exhales slowly, his shoulders lowering just slightly, tension he did not realize he was carrying beginning to ease, not completely, not all at once, but enough to notice, enough to feel, and his fingers shift gently through the damp fur, slower now, more certain, as if remembering the motion rather than learning it, and the sensation brings something else with it, another fragment, another piece of a life that once had structure, purpose, direction, long mornings, clear commands, the steady presence of a partner that never needed explanation. And his voice comes again, quieter now, but steadier than before. Where have you been? The question soft, not demanding an answer, just acknowledging the time that has passed, the distance that once existed. And Ranger responds the only way he can, by staying exactly where he is, pressing just slightly closer, his body aligned with Daniel's side, as if no separation ever happened, as if the years between them were nothing more than a pause. And Daniel swallows hard, his gaze dropping briefly before lifting again, studying every detail with a focus that feels almost urgent now. Because if this is real, if this is truly him, then something else must be true as well, something he has not yet allowed himself to consider. And his hand moves again, sliding carefully beneath the fur along Ranger's neck, this time searching with intention, and there, hidden just beneath the worn strap, his fingers find it, a small piece of metal, cool against his skin, partially obscured but unmistakable in shape. And his breath catches, sharper this time, his chest tightening as his hand stills, because he knows what this is. He knows it before he even sees it fully, and slowly, carefully, he lifts the edge of the strap just enough to reveal it, a dog tag. Worn, scratched, but still there, still intact. And for a moment he cannot read it, his vision blurring slightly as something shifts behind his eyes, something he has not allowed in a long time. And he blinks, once, then again, forcing himself to focus, to see. And the letters come into view, faint but clear enough. USMCK9 unit. And beneath it, a name, not new, not unfamiliar, but his, the one he gave, the one he thought had been left behind along with everything else, Ranger. And Daniel's hand trembles slightly as he lowers the tag back against the dog's neck, his fingers lingering there as if holding on to the proof of what he is seeing, and his voice, when it comes, is barely more than a breath. You came back, not a question, not anymore, but a realization, a truth settling into place with quiet certainty. And Ranger shifts again, this time lifting his head just enough to press it more firmly against Daniel's side. A silent answer. A confirmation that does not need words, and something inside Daniel finally breaks, not in a way that shatters him, but in a way that opens him, that allows something long buried to rise to the surface, his shoulders shaking just slightly as he leans forward, his forehead lowering until it nearly touches Ranger's head, his hand tightening gently in the fur as if anchoring himself to this moment, and the sound that escapes him is quiet, almost lost in the damp air, but it is real. It is present, and it carries something he has not felt in a long time. Not grief, not emptiness, but release. And Ranger does not move away, does not pull back. He remains exactly where he is, steady, grounded, a constant in a moment that feels anything but. And for the first time since the rain began, Daniel does not notice the cold. He does not notice the gray sky or the empty park, because he is no longer alone, not in the way that mattered most, because something he thought he had lost forever has found its way back to him, not through noise, not through force, but through quiet, through patience, through a presence that never stopped remembering, even when he did. Daniel does not pull away, even after the moment settles, even after the weight of what just happened begins to sink into something quieter, something steadier, because letting go now would feel like stepping back into a version of himself he no longer wants to return to. And his hand remains in Ranger's fur, fingers moving slowly, deliberately, as if relearning something he once knew without thinking. And the dog stays exactly where he is, pressed close, grounded, his presence firm in a way that feels both familiar and new. And for a long moment there is nothing but that, the quiet exchange of warmth and breath, the world around them continuing without interruption, unaware that something far more important than passing time is unfolding in stillness. And Daniel lifts his head slightly, his eyes scanning the park again, not with the same emptiness as before, but with a different awareness, as if seeing it for the first time in months, the wet pavement, the distant figures moving through their routines, the muted sound of a car passing somewhere beyond the trees. All of it the same, and yet none of it feels quite as heavy, quite as distant. And he exhales slowly, his breath no longer shallow, no longer forced, but fuller, deeper, as if something inside him has made room again, and his voice comes quietly, not directed outward, but meant for the presence beside him. I stopped coming out here for a while, he says, his tone low, steady, almost reflective, like he is speaking to someone who already understands, like he is filling in the silence rather than breaking it. Used to sit here every morning, same bench, same time, and Ranger's ear flicks slightly at the sound, not reacting in confusion but in attention, and Daniel nods faintly, as if that small response is enough to continue. After everything changed, I just stayed inside. Easier that way. Fewer reminders, fewer people looking at you like they're trying to figure out what you used to be. And his hand pauses briefly before continuing its slow motion through the fur, and he glances down at Ranger again, his expression softer now, less guarded. You would have hated that, he adds, a faint trace of something lighter touching his voice, not quite a smile, but closer than he has been in a long time. And Ranger shifts slightly, adjusting his position to remain aligned with Daniel's side. The movement smooth, practiced, like a response without needing a command, and Daniel notices it, of course he does. And something in him steadies further, something that had been drifting now, finding a place to settle. And he leans back slightly in his chair, his posture no longer collapsed inward but open, his shoulders no longer carrying the same invisible weight, and his eyes lift toward the gray sky, the mist thinning enough now to reveal a faint brightness pushing through, not strong, not overwhelming, but present, and he breathes it in, slow, steady, as if allowing himself to exist in this moment rather than endure it. And his hand moves again, this time resting more firmly against Ranger's neck, not testing, not searching, but holding, and his voice lowers once more, quieter now, almost like a promise spoken without intent. "I thought I lost everything out there," he says, the words simple, but carrying more than they reveal, and he does not explain further, does not need to, because the silence that follows is not empty. It is full of everything that has not been said, everything that does not need to be, and Ranger remains beside him, unmoving, unwavering, as if confirming that not everything was lost, that something remained, something found its way back, and Daniel closes his eyes for a brief moment, not to escape, but to feel, to hold on to the shift happening inside him, the quiet rebuilding of something he thought was gone, and when he opens them again, the world is still, gray, still damp, still ordinary, but it no longer feels as heavy, no longer feels like something he has to endure alone, and he glances down once more, his hand giving a gentle, deliberate stroke through Ranger's fur, and for the first time since the morning began, there is no hesitation in the touch, no uncertainty in the connection, only presence, only the simple, undeniable truth that he is not alone, not anymore. And Ranger, as if understanding this without needing words, remains exactly where he is, steady and certain, as if he has no intention of ever leaving again. The mist begins to lift in slow, quiet layers, not all at once, but enough to let a pale stretch of morning light reach across the park, touching the edges of the benches, the damp grass, the worn path beneath Daniel's wheels, and he notices it without trying, the way the gray shifts into something softer, something less heavy, and for the first time in a long while, he does not look away from it. He lets it stay, lets it exist in his field of view without turning inward, and his hand continues its steady motion along Ranger's neck, no longer searching, no longer uncertain, just present, just there, and Ranger remains beside him as he has been, unmoving in the ways that matter, but alive in the subtle details, the rise and fall of his breath, the small adjustments of his ears as distant sounds pass through the air, the quiet awareness that never fades, and Daniel exhales slowly, his shoulders settling into a posture that feels less like holding himself together and more like simply being, and his gaze drifts outward again, not scanning, not avoiding, but observing, the world continuing as it always has, people walking, voices faint in the distance, a car door closing somewhere beyond the trees, and none of it presses against him the way it did before. None of it feels like something he has to endure alone, and he shifts slightly in his chair, not out of discomfort, but out of intention, the wheels rolling forward just a few inches with a soft sound against the damp ground, and Ranger moves with him instantly, rising and stepping into place without command, without hesitation, aligning himself beside Daniel with the same quiet precision, and Daniel notices it, of course he does. And something in him responds, not with surprise now, but with recognition, acceptance, as if this is exactly how it should be, and he glances down at Ranger, his expression steady, grounded, and for a moment he says nothing, because words feel unnecessary in a presence like this, but then his voice comes, low and even, "You always did that," the faintest trace of warmth threading through the sentence, not quite a smile, but close enough to be felt, never needed to be told twice, and Ranger's ear flicks slightly, the smallest acknowledgement, and Daniel lets out a breath that feels different from the ones before it, not heavy, not forced, but something closer to relief, and he looks ahead again, toward the path that stretches out in front of him, damp and empty, but no longer distant, no longer unreachable, and for a brief moment he hesitates, not out of fear, but out of the weight of what it means to move forward again, to step into something beyond the stillness he has been living in. And his hand rests once more against Ranger's neck, grounding himself in that steady presence. And then, quietly, Without ceremony, he moves, the wheelchair rolling forward along the path. Slow at first, deliberate, the sound of the wheels cutting softly through the thin layer of water on the concrete. And Ranger walks beside him, perfectly aligned, not leading, not lagging, but matching his pace with a quiet certainty that feels like more than training, more than habit. It feels like choice, like commitment. And Daniel's gaze remains forward now, not fixed on the past, not pulled back by what was lost, but open to what is in front of him. And the light continues to grow, faint but steady, pushing through the gray in a way that feels almost symbolic, though he does not name it. As such, he simply notices it, accepts it, and as they move together down the path, there is no urgency, no rush, just a quiet progression, a shared movement that speaks more than words ever could. And Daniel's hand lifts briefly from the wheel to rest once more against Ranger's side. A simple gesture, steady and sure, and Ranger leans into it just slightly, not breaking stride, not faltering, just there, just present. And in that moment, nothing else feels as important as the fact that he is not moving forward alone, not anymore, and the path ahead, though still uncertain, no longer feels empty, because beside him, matching every step, is something that chose to return, something that chose to stay, and together, without needing to say it, they begin again. The path stretches ahead of them in quiet patience, still damp from the morning rain, but beginning to catch the first real light of day. And Daniel keeps moving, not fast, not with urgency, but with a steadiness that feels new, unfamiliar in the best way, his hands guiding the wheels with a rhythm that is no longer forced, no longer mechanical, but something closer to intention. And Ranger remains beside him without deviation, every step measured, every movement aligned, as if the distance between them has been erased completely, as if time itself has agreed to step aside and let this moment exist without interruption. And the sounds of the park begin to shift, subtle at first, the distant voices clearer now, the rustle of leaves carrying a little more life, the low hum of the city waking up beyond the trees. And Daniel notices it all without retreating inward, without bracing himself against it. He lets it come, lets it exist around him without turning away, and his gaze remains forward, fixed not on what he has lost, but on what is unfolding in front of him, one quiet second at a time. And after a while, he slows, not because he has to, but because he chooses to, the wheels coming to a gentle stop near a stretch of grass where the light falls a little stronger, breaking through the last of the gray. And Ranger stops with him, perfectly in sync, his posture steady, his presence unwavering. And Daniel exhales, long and slow, his shoulders easing as he takes in the moment, not rushing past it, not questioning it, just allowing it to be what it is. And his hand lifts from the wheel again, moving without hesitation to rest against Ranger's side, fingers pressing gently into the thick fur, grounding himself in something real, something certain. And for a moment he says nothing, because words feel unnecessary here, because the silence between them carries more truth than anything he could try to explain. And Ranger leans slightly into the touch, not enough to disrupt, just enough to respond, just enough to remind him that this is not something imagined, not something fleeting, but something present, something chosen. And Daniel's eyes lower briefly, his gaze softening as he studies the dog beside him, not searching anymore, not questioning, but recognizing, fully, completely. And his voice, when it finally comes, is quiet, steady, no longer carrying the weight it once did. Guess you never forgot me. The words simple, almost understated, but they hold something deeper beneath them, something that does not need to be named. And Ranger's ears flick once, his posture unchanged, his presence the same as it has been from the moment he arrived, constant, unwavering. And Daniel nods faintly, as if that small response is enough, as if it confirms everything he needs to know. And he lifts his gaze again, looking out across the park as the light continues to grow, the gray sky giving way inch by inch to something clearer, something warmer. And for the first time and longer than he can remember, he does not feel like he is standing outside of it. He does not feel like he is watching life happen from a distance, because he is in it now, present in a way he has not allowed himself to be. And his hands return to the wheels, but he does not move immediately. He pauses, just for a second, just long enough to feel the stillness settle into something calm rather than empty. And then, quietly, he speaks again, not as a command, not as a test, but as something else entirely, something closer to trust. Come on, the words soft, almost gentle, and he begins to move forward once more, the wheels turning smoothly beneath his hands, and Ranger steps with him instantly, without hesitation, without question, and together they continue down the path, not toward something defined, not toward a destination that needs to be reached, but forward, simply forward, and the space between each movement feels lighter now, less burdened, less heavy, as if something unseen has shifted, as if something that once held him in place has finally loosened its grip. And as they move, Daniel's hand drifts once more from the wheel to rest briefly against Ranger's back. A small gesture, almost instinctive, and Ranger leans into it again, steady, present, unchanged. And in that quiet exchange, there is something that does not need to be spoken, something that exists beyond explanation, a kind of understanding that does not rely on words, only on presence, only on staying. And the park behind them continues to fill with life, with movement, with sound, but none of it pulls Daniel away anymore. None of it feels like something he has to brace against, because beside him, step for step, breath for breath, is something that chose him again, something that remembered when he could not. And as the light finally breaks through the last of the morning gray, touching the path ahead in a way that feels almost like a promise, Daniel does not look back. He does not hesitate. He simply keeps moving. And this time, he is not alone. And somehow, quietly, without fanfare, that changes everything.